Hey, if you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing. I don't know why I'm doing this. Alright, so first let me say that I am petrified of needles. Like, that is no joke, alright? I have a tattoo already, and it was such a mission to get, alright? Now, having said that, I'm issuing a tattoo challenge. Now, a lot of you might be wondering, what is that? Well, there's a link in the description below. Please go check it out. It's called the Tattoo Challenge. In a nutshell, if you guys can get me to 5,000k subscribers before the 16th of August, I'm gonna get a tattoo chosen by you guys. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why I decided to do this. Having said that, enjoy the show. Hey guys, how are you guys doing? Welcome to Let's Talk. And today I have someone I'm so excited to have on the show because you've seen him on probably every single stream in South Africa. He's always on Ronaldo's channel. He's on Ramon's channel sometimes. He's on Germ's channel. He's on a few channels. You've seen his little Jannie Vandervalt, and he has his little spanner there next to him. He's one of the best moderators I know of in South Africa. No joke. He's always on point. Never, ever know how he does it, but you just mention a link and then boom, there it is. Jannie's there. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, Jannie is on my show tonight, and we're going to be talking about technology and how it has affected the humankind or the human race. So please, if you guys have any thoughts on that, do start commenting. Thank you all so much who have tuned in already. Reese, thank you for joining. Bradley Cook, I will make you a moderator after the show, I promise. Or I'll try and see if I can do it now. Chris Wyatt, thank you for tuning in, buddy. Mr. Punisher, hola. And Unconfirmed Millionaire, thank you so much for tuning in, as well as Misha. Nice to see you here as well. I asked your number yesterday. I remember you. I remember you. Still waiting on that email. Ronaldo, Germ, Ramon, other channels. Chris Wyatt as well. Chris Wyatt as well. I said in South Africa, Chris, but I guess Jannie also ventures to the US from time to time. So, Jannie, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for the awesome introduction, Joe, and thanks for the opportunity to be on your channel and let's talk about tech.
Absolutely. So just give my audience a bit of a background about yourself, like how you got involved with tech, because you showed me earlier today a very interesting setup, which I forgot to upload on here, but it's quite you got a nice PC, you got a nice setup. So tell us, how did you get involved in tech?
All right, good. So I think I was lucky enough, firstly, that I grew up where my dad was also in one way or another involved with computers and whatever. So I grew up with computers in the house. I think that was probably one of the most important starts for me because I had that exposure where when I was a kid, 9 out of my 10 friends, not that I had 10 friends, but most of my friends didn't have computers. They would have some old TV game console or something, but I actually had a computer, and that was something really unique. But as the years progressed, I think my love for technology grew because I had that knack of trying to take things apart and trying to figure out how it works and figure out if I could improve on it, even though there wasn't necessarily room for improvement. That's what I did. And I have a funny story to tell you about that, what I did to my dad's computer about 30 years ago. But that's kind of like where it started. So as the years progressed, I actually wanted to be a lawyer in my high school years.
Interesting.
And that, I don't know if it was just because of a show we watched on TV, Ally McBeal or something, I can't recall, but we ended up, that was it just never, took on. My love for technology has always just been there, and that's how the opportunity started. So fresh out of school, when all my friends went to, school holidays or matric holidays, they all went to the beach and whatever. I had the opportunity to start work that following Monday.
Okay.
And it was a holiday job, but working towards just getting through the holiday, and then I would move to my grandparents and go and try and study and do whatever. But I ended up getting that holiday job, and that job turned into a paid job, and then it turned into the rest of my career. So the first big move for me was that, a lot of people don't know, I matriculated when I was 17 years old. So I only got my license my year out of school, though, right? So you can imagine how bad that was for me, that my first few months of working, I couldn't even drive.
Wow.
Well, I could drive, I just wasn't allowed to drive. So I had to walk around everywhere where I needed to go and do whatever IT support. It was on a site, ISCOR site when I started my first job. But from there on, my first real big move was when I moved to Richards Bay and got my first permanent job with the company I was working for at the time. But that's kind of how my IT life started. And I was one of those guys that could never just do IT support. So as soon as my calls for the day was done, whatever printer I needed to fix or computer I needed to fix or mouse that was broken, when that was done, I would run to the more senior IT guys who typically look after some of the back end type of stuff, and I would hang around with them, and I would try and do whatever I could to try and impress them that, hey, I can do all of these things, and that's how I worked my way up. So I really started from the bottom.
Yeah, and you've been in tech, it sounds like, ever since, or involved in that. Please tell us the story of what happened with your dad. Let's start off with that. What happened with your dad?
Right. So I don't know if you know like what a car hooter looks like, but the hooter unit, or I don't know, hooter is probably the English word for it as well, but it has like a little I don't know what the English word for it is, but that there's two parts to it. There's the mechanical part that actually vibrates, and then there's that other part that looks like a flute almost. I don't know really what you call it, but that part had like a little hole in it. And if you put like a little speaker or something in that hole, obviously how that cavity or whatever worked, it would amplify the sound that comes out of it. Now, old computers, when you switch them on, they had that beep sound when you switch it on, and then it kind of like knows it's going through its phases, and it would beep a couple of times. So imagine that beep that's already, half loud, put onto that hooter, and then that hooter makes a beep sound. So there's my dad, he comes home, and the computer was more for him. I mean, I had some playtime to play games and stuff, but my dad was doing drawings and all kinds of things on the computer. But when he switched it on, and that thing went beep, it didn't just go beep. That was like a really loud sound, and my dad was almost off his chair, but I was also running, so, but...
So you pranked your father, in other words.
Yeah, but not really to do that. Actually, why I did that, though, was for when I do play games, the audio was so soft, and you couldn't always hear whatever game. I can't remember whatever game it was at the time, but that would amplify the sound a little bit, because obviously that little speaker would amplify through that horns, that, yes. I don't know what you call the thing exactly, but that would amplify the sound, and that's really what I wanted to get out of it. So it was an upgrade that I did, but obviously it also upgraded the beep when you started.
How old were you when you did this?
Oh man,
you sound like Dexter's Laboratory right
now. Probably like, I think it would have been like less than 10 years old, somewhere there, or
what?
roughly 10 years old, right about there. So.
And you were messing around with all that stuff?
Yeah, dude, I have a photo. I should have actually sent it to you. I have a photo of when I was 3 years old, sitting in front of a Commodore 64.
Really?
Now, a Commodore 64, for the guys that don't know what that is a very old computer where the computer was almost like built into the keyboard. So the keyboard was like thick, and the processing unit and whatever was inside there. But those computers also had like tape drives connected to it. So whatever application you needed to run, or if it was a game or something, you would, put the tape in, and then you run it to like number 137, and then you press play, and then you go on the Commodore and you start the game, and that would be typically connected to a TV. So I have a photo of sitting in front of that computer playing games at 3 years old. And I mean, at 3 years old, I can double check with my dad, but I think I was proficient enough to know that if I wanted to play Ghosts and Goblins or whatever those old games was, you put this tape in, you forward it to that number, you type in these commands, and then the game starts. So
at 3 years old.
Yeah. So
dude, you're like
I should
genius.
have known. I should have known that, don't even look past IT or whatever. Don't even try and be a lawyer. I was destined to be in technology. So
that's awesome, man. All right, cool. So let's start the discussion. I don't know if anyone wants to comment, but again, please comment. I see a lot of people. Oh, by the way, Bradley, I made you a moderator. You should see the spanner now. Chris Wyatt commenting on your background, saying the arcade green screen brings back memories of so many quarters gone.
Oh, I have a story about that as well.
Tell us. Come on, don't hold back.
So my grandparents lived next to a Portuguese cafe. Mm-hmm. So and this Portuguese cafe, like a corner cafe, right? So they had, all the general stuff: bread, milk, some veg, the daily newspaper, whatever. And my grandparents would always buy like bottles of Coca-Cola. And you always used to get those old bottles in like glass bottles, and then those glass bottles you would go and trade them in for like 20 cents or whatever it was at the time. So I don't think they knew really how many of those glass bottles they had, because me and my cousin would steal a couple of those glass bottles. Then we would put them over the wall on top of something, and then we would walk around, sneak out, go take those bottles, hand them in, get a handful of 20 cents or whatever the exchange rate for the glass bottles was, and then we would go and play arcade games. So yeah, I mean, certainly no. That's why I chose this background, because I think it kind of just goes back to, where it started for me, which was like in the 80s. I mean, being an 81 baby, that gives away my age, but it's where the millennials started. I was the first of the millennials.
Yeah, well, I love your background as well, all the arcade games, and I know that you're also a gamer, and we might touch on that a bit later. But I think that let's get right into the topic at hand, which is technology and how we feel that it has affected the human race, so to speak. I'll give my opinion, and then you can maybe add, or people in the chats can also add to give their opinion on how they think technology has affected the human race. I think this is where I am on it. I think there's a lot of great inventions that have been done over the years, especially since the advent of the computer. And I don't know if you've seen Imitation Game, which is basically the movie about basically the first computer or anything like it, which was a fascinating movie. I encourage everyone to go watch it. And the whole. Then we had IMB, or
IBM.
IBM, and all those companies started, and there's been a lot of great things that have happened over the past 20 years, 40 years, and I think it's all great. Our phones, I mean, wow. I mean, I remember when the phone first, like the mobile phone, not when it first came out, but I remember you didn't have like color screen. You just had like a green and then black pixels, and there was no camera, there was no color, it was just send a text and phone. That's it, and save contents. That's all it was. And then when the camera came out for the phone, it was like, oh my word, there's a camera on a phone. This is amazing. Um, and then from there, it just gradually like went crazy. And I think those inventions are cool. Going to space is always cool. What happened now with Elon Musk?
SpaceX.
Yeah, SpaceX. That's great. That's technology advancing. But I do believe that there's a lot of downside to it. So I honestly, even though what I'm doing now, this live stream, this is I'm able to do this with people and meet interesting people because of the internet. It's a great thing. YouTube, internet, streaming, amazing stuff, and connect with people as well. But I think the internet has also brought a lot of humans, almost like their bad side has come out. Social media. Over the past few months, no, longer than that, maybe for the past 2 years, I've hated social media. Yes, I'm still part of it. Yes, I still post, and yes, I still put content out there. But I'm a comedian, and I have a brand, and I want to get. That's social media is good in that part where you can reach your fans and get out there a bit more. But it definitely has its downside: the negativity, the bullying, the cyberbullying, and human trafficking as well can happen through internet. There was a big case in America that happened a year or two ago. If you go watch Jane Doe documentary on Netflix, it explains that. Very, very, very good documentary on Netflix. Go watch that. And yeah, so those are just some of the things that I think, like, for the most part, I think tech has hindered us. I mean, I feel that the human race is also less active. We're not as. But I mean, sure, you got cars and stuff like that. Great cars get you from A to B. But at the same time, we become lazy. I mean, I'm one of them. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I got a double chin. I don't exercise much. So technology for me hasn't really worked out, I guess.
I
But
hide my chin with my beard.
yeah, well, that's the thing.
So
I grow my
see,
beard,
it's
but then it gets.
behind you.
I grow my beard too, but then it gets. I don't know. My skin gets irritated. But yeah, like I don't know. That's in a nutshell. I can go on and on, but in a nutshell, it's like a love-hate relationship with technology with me. Now, what's your view?
I agree. I think, before I start with that, there's another story I want to tell. So there's a guy that went to school with me, whose name will remain unsaid.
Cool.
Doesn't really matter. This guy's name, whatever his name was, he was an athlete, right? So this was primary school. And he was the athlete that always won. He was really good at athletics. He always came first in whatever, track thing he did. And the one day, I can't remember what grade it was, like grade 7, which is like standard 5 or standard 5, grade 6 or grade 7, so standard 4, standard 5 somewhere. I remember we had to write a Afrikaans, what do you call it, like a paper, for lack of a better word. And the topic of that was that winning is not everything. Now, the reason why I want to mention that is because at that time, that's the one guy that I felt sorry for, because that's the one guy where winning was everything, though, right? Because that's what his life revolved around. He was an athlete. That was what he lived for. Um, and he is one of those guys that you always just knew would be progressing in life and become one of our major sport athletes, whatever. I'm not sure where he is in life today, but be that as it may, I think the same applies to this, because in this question, I'm that guy. I'm that guy that's voting for tech, because that's what my livelihood consists of, but that's also what I believe in. But very much like you say, I think we've created our own problems today with technology. So, if we just let's look at phones. So 20 years ago, 2000, which is not that long ago though, right? We didn't have, don't even think we had smartphones yet. And if you had a smartphone, it would be a business phone, and
that
it would
that
be
Nokia
extremely
one that was
expensive.
like a brick, and then you would open it up. Do you remember that one? I
The
think that
Nokia
was
communicator.
yeah,
Yeah. I think it was a Nokia communicator or something.
yeah.
And you know what? There's probably still one of those phones out there somewhere today. Somebody still has one, and that phone's battery still lasts. It hasn't backed up yet. But, you know, at that time, like you say, that was what a phone was for us. It was just a device to be reachable, because that's what we needed at the time. But then time progressed. These devices started getting cameras, and the first cameras was crap, though, right? I mean, you didn't take nice photos with those things. It was really low resolution. But also that argument remained that you still had a full-on digital camera, and it was that transition time where you didn't know what these phones were supposed to be, and it was becoming these smartphones. But it was also at a time where we didn't know where phones was heading towards, because it was primarily used as a business device. I mean, kids in the 2000s, at my age at the time, 22 years, whatever old, you would have had a phone for work or, whatever purposes. But kids at that time, so if you were in school at that time, you would not have a phone, because it's just one of those things that you wouldn't need at that time. But then progress a couple of years ahead to 2007 somewhere, when Apple announced the first Apple iPhone. I think that was when it shook the mobile phone world,
Yeah.
because you had the Androids out and you had some of those devices available. But again, we didn't know what we needed to do with these devices. There was an ecosystem that needed applications that nobody was developing for. And, there was just no standards in that space. So I think we needed to go through all of that to be where we are at today, where I think if we had to dial that forward 20 years, imagine if we had to go through lockdown in 2000 versus having to go through lockdown today. I don't think we would have survived if we had to go through lockdown in 2000, like the way we are going through lockdown today. So in that sense, though, tech has helped us quite a lot to be more accessible, more in touch, more whatever you need it to be, whenever you need it to be. And with that, obviously, that exposure that's come, now you start seeing children getting access to technology, which is something we can touch on because that's something that I believe in, but I think it needs to be controlled because you don't want children to stumble across things that they shouldn't be, but you also have the cyberbullying side, and you have all these man-made problems that we've created for ourselves with technology. But if you talk to a gamer today, like a hardcore gamer, they would tell you that these cell phone gamers, that's not playing games though, right? Because you don't play games on a cell phone. Playing games, it's either you're a console gamer or you're a PC gamer, and even console and PC gamers are looking at each other funny because those two don't believe that they are true gamers, because console gaming came from those old consoles we had with the cartridge that you
Atari
would
and all
blow
that,
and lick
yeah.
and whatever and then stick it in. So kids today, they'll probably whip my butt if I have to play a game on them on mobile, because they are used to their thumbs, on that touchscreen, manipulating the game. But then you look at SpaceX and you look at them landing that SpaceX rocket on 3 touchscreens or 2 big touchscreens with like a touch panel interface. Dude, that is massive, because there's no manual controls, no traditional way of doing things that has just gone leaps and bounds ahead. So that is what I think technology has meant for us, and that's the piece that I believe in. But the problem is we have these man-made problems for ourselves. Like you said, we have to deal with what social media has brought along, because social media was supposed to I think close that loop in terms of communication, in terms of marketing, branding. It was something that launched when the .com stuff started going down, and that boom in 2000 kind of like started becoming less, I think, relevant. That's when social media started picking up, because I don't know, how old is YouTube, like 15 years or
Yeah, somewhere there.
13 years old, somewhere there. 13 years ago, I had a discussion with my father-in-law, and
13, I think.
we were talking about like, have you seen YouTube? Like, have you seen these videos on YouTube? Like, where are they storing all this stuff? Like, how much disk space do they have and whatever, That was the traditional things we were worried about, but yet that's something that survived, and it's a thriving business today, because I mean, lots of people are making a living off it, or lots of people are built their brand on top of it. So
Yeah.
uh, you know, again, as with any of those things, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, there is those problems we have ourselves, because, like you say, there is people are ranting, people are. It's an easy avenue to express yourself. People don't always understand what express yourself means, because you can get yourself into trouble by expressing yourself in the wrong way, and people have been victim to some of those things, as you know. So that's probably the one bad side of social media. But then let's bring that back a little bit closer to just tech with children. I think a couple of years ago, we had a family discussion with my sister and them, and and as a joke, it was like, their son would be like the way we grew up. They would play in mud and play with cars and play with whatever, because not that it's wrong. I mean, they needed that exposure, because they needed that outside life and whatever. And you didn't think about them having an iPad or something, and you didn't think about what that would mean for them. Yet today, he is playing outside as normal kids, yet when he goes inside, he's like a tech freak. He understands how to install apps, remove apps. He understands how all of those tech works, and he grasped it at the age of 5 years old. So now you're dealing with somebody that's grasping technology way faster than what I grasped it, even, and way faster than what the average person grasps it. And that is the next generation of people, though. And I'm not talking about somebody that's 5, 6, 7 years old today. I'm talking about somebody that is 20 years old today, because they would be a Generation Z, post-millennial. They would have been born after like 96 somewhere, so they would have grown up with all of this technology. So they are starting work today, growing up with technology 9 out of 10 times.
Well, you bring up an interesting point there, because I have nephews now, right? So they play with the iPad and stuff like that, and there's like, I feel like my dad, and it's so uncomfortable for me, because I used to be like, my dad wasn't into tech that much, and I used to go to him and be like, "Hey, Dad, look what this phone can do. Hey, Dad, look what this can do. Hey, Dad, look what that can do. Oh, look, if you do this, this will happen." And now my nephews are coming to me and like, "Hey, Uncle Joe, look. look at what this can do. And I'm like, how did you even get into my emails? Like how? And they just know all these tricks and stuff. And I feel now like my father. I'm like, oh man, I feel so old. But now I just want to touch on some of the comments that came through while you were talking. Jannie van der Valt, this is from Chris. My first digital camera was in 1995. It was a Casio, and he says that he still has his Nokia communicator. Um, uh, so yeah, that's Chris. It'd be interesting to
And it
know.
probably still charges though, right? So,
Yeah.
and does it still work?
I would like to know like if it still works and like how much would that go for now? You must be able to get like quite a bit for it. All right, so Luke leads Slingers. Thank you so much for tuning in. But if you haven't, by the way, those of you that are watching, if you haven't yet, please subscribe. So Luke leads Slinger says, I disagree, Yanni. Lockdown pre-tech would be exactly the same as now. The perspective is the same. An interesting viewpoint, no doubt. I think touching on that now, I would tend to actually agree with Luke. I think yes, from your perspective of like we're closer now. Like again, we can do streams like this and stuff like that. Uh, I think we would have been better off without the social media though. Like I think I would drop social media out of like let's like if we went back in time now, and I could choose which tech to have during a lockdown in the 2000s, I would say internet, but without the social media.
Okay, interesting.
Because I think social media isn't helping. Like, there's other things that we must remember. There's other things that if we wanted to communicate, there's WhatsApp, there's emails, there's other things that would still exist in that
Yep.
world. So, but I don't know. Social media for me is a very toxic, or can be a very toxic place. I mean, look at Twitter. Um, what do you? I don't know. Do you still stand by that opinion?
So, so I mean, okay. So in that question, and I do see what Luke Letzlinger is saying. So before we go to that, so would you put YouTube in that same social media vertical then? Would YouTube also be classified as social media?
Technically, it
Or
is. Technically, well, I don't know. Actually, there's a bit of a
there's two
there's
aspects to YouTube though. There's the
yeah
live video, like what we have now, which could be seen as
makes it
social
social
media
media.
interactive.
Yeah.
But then you have the traditional YouTube. I don't know when YouTube started with the whole live thing and whatever. That's
Mm.
I don't know how old that feature is, but uploading videos and getting your content out and whatever, YouTube is a very informative website because you can learn a lot of things like learning how to, I don't know, fix your garage door spring or something, or how to tighten that or something. And I mean, and I see Luke's comments around ask a kid to assemble a carburetor. And that's like, I see that, but how I would approach that question is if I don't know how to do something, I'm going to go and Google how to do it,
Mm.
or I'm going to go on YouTube how to do that. So um, I'm using that as a positive avenue to get access to that information because, I mean, we could talk about internet censorship and all of that type of stuff, but in the 80s or 90s when the internet started booming for all of us, is internet was an information superhighway.
Yeah.
So it was that place where you would go and get knowledge on stuff. So I would still use that to my advantage today because there's a lot of stuff I don't know how to do, but with the help of Google and YouTube, I'll figure out how to do it. And I've taught myself many things like that today. So
So maybe we should call it How To, just a website that has videos of how to do things, and that's it.
yeah, censor it. If it's not how to do it, censor it and remove. But back to Luke's question. So okay, so lockdown pre-tech would be exactly the same as now. So the perspective is the same. So what would we do with kids if you didn't have tech though? How would you keep kids busy? Because I
I
mean,
don't think he means
how would
like tech in
you
the sense of like no TV, no consoles, no none of that.
Netflix?
Or maybe he does. I don't know. Well, that's a
I
good
mean,
question, Luke. Can you be a bit more specific? Do you mean like no tech at all? So like Amish, or do you mean like no, we still have like certain things like TV and stuff, just not internet? because
And smart TV
yeah.
and Netflix and whatever.
Yeah. And then I like what Bradley Cook said here. Whilst bringing everyone closer together and creating the global village, tech has managed to push everyone further away from each other and created a demand and expectation of instant gratification. I could not agree more. It's exactly why I hate social media. Because yes, it does bring people closer together. Absolutely. I mean, Yanni, you're on my show because of social media. You messaged me on Facebook
Exactly.
and you're on my show. So that's great. But at the same time, we're worlds apart, like in terms of like maybe not you and me specifically, but I do like Bradley said, he said it perfectly here. It's 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 pushed everyone further away because I will be, I've seen it with my nephews. Like I said, they have an iPad, so they'll be sitting at the dinner table on their iPads. So we're close, but we're not. I'm not getting to know them. They're playing the game all the time.
Yeah.
I don't get the chance to like really engage with them and then if you dare take an iPad away from a freaking 4 or 5 year old, try it. Um, so yeah, like that's where I see it with the kids in the new generation. They're always on their phone, like they're always tweeting or their Snapchat or it's TikTok or it's whatever. I mean, great content's going out there, but flip, you said it yourself. You used to play in the mud and stuff like that, and I did too. I definitely was outside enjoying the wild of Texas. Um, and I think kids need to do that more often, man. They need to like put down their tech and go and eat a worm. Just eat a worm.
Exactly. And I think that's the job of where parents should come in, or a responsible person should then come in, depending on whatever the situation is. But I think you shouldn't, because again, remember, I'm a lot pro tech here in this case, though, because that's what I'm fighting for. But
Yeah, that's what makes it
you
so interesting.
shouldn't keep technology away from children, because if I look at it now, just during lockdown, now we use a technology at work. It's called Microsoft Teams, which is essentially the evolution of what Skype is. But for the guys that don't know what Skype was like one of those first technologies that we used to communicate and chat with people, because it kind of like broke those boundaries and you could have video calling. But it also had this really bulletproof protocol that you could have really decent quality conversations across borders, across countries. Now, Teams has taken that plus a lot of collaboration rolled up into one, which makes it for a very collaborative tool to do all your work in documentation, co-authoring on documents, etc. So if I look at now how many of my colleagues with kids in school, where the school immediately transitioned over onto Teams. Now, I don't know if Microsoft made Teams educational version or something free for all the training or education institutions. But if I just look at how many kids have started adopting Microsoft Teams to do their daily schoolwork, notes, sharing of documents, sharing of whatever, now you have potentially, I don't know, 10-year-olds to 18-year-olds somewhere possibly, using a tool that we are only starting to teach some people where I work.
Yeah, but that's
So,
that's that's a moderated in a way kind of technology. So, for example, or that is to say, it's a technology made for a specific purpose, right? So that's something I can get behind. But like for example, what Reese is saying here, Joey, I don't think so. There are lots of people alone during lockdown, and social media, FaceTime, and all of that helps to communicate with them, and that helps to save lives. I can understand that, but again, I just said social media. There's still WhatsApp, emails, your what you just spoke about, right?
yeah.
I'm all for that. Zoom can still exist. Skype can still exist. It's not a social media platform. That is something that I can still use WhatsApp. I can still use all that stuff because WhatsApp I think is a great. Well, not now. I used to think it was great. I prefer Telegram now. But my point is instant communication with someone that's far on the other side of the world. That is something I can get behind because it has its uses in a like Reset to save lives. Social media though, it creates even more depression for some people, more than it
Yeah,
does in some cases to save their lives. The trolls, the cyberbullying. I know a few friends of mine that have been completely traumatized because of it. And one could argue in our world now, you can say, okay, well then get off social media and stuff like that. Of course, you can do that, but I'm just saying in terms of like back in 2000, if we were in a lockdown in the 2000s, I would say leave social media out. Facebook, Twitter, SnapScan, TikTok. It's not SnapScan. Sorry, Snapchat. All those social media, even Parlay, all that stuff. Leave it out. Give us WhatsApp. Give us Skype. Give us Zoom. Give us the internet. Your meeting thing. All that stuff. I agree because again, with that technology that you spoke of now, your business is able to run, and I'm
yeah.
fully behind that. When it comes to YouTube, I honestly, I think first we need to define what YouTube is. Is it a social media platform, or is it, like you said, is it not? But yeah, that's how I feel about that.
And I mean, maybe my view on that is not to promote, like Teams or Skype or whatever. But I think it's just that exposure to technology. I think kids that's had exposure to technology in some way versus kids that's not had that exposure would be able to latch on to using technology a lot faster when
Fair
they have
enough.
to use it.
Fair enough.
So that's, I think, what I was trying to say. Because second to that, though, is as kids grow up, I would find it really hard that there is young Generation Z type of individuals that is joining the workforce that is looking at the way how we do IT today or how we use IT in a work situation today and think like, hey, this is prehistoric.
Mm.
So, and I think we're in that bridge period. I think it's going to take 10 years for that to disappear and how organizational technology or enterprise technology changes. But back to the point around social media, I think I agree with that. If I had to choose something that we could live without, probably social media in its entirety would be a good one. But it's again, what does social media mean for you? Because for me, social media is a consumption thing.
Mm.
And what social media am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about mostly probably Facebook and a little bit of Twitter. Let's leave YouTube out of that because YouTube means a lot more for me than just the social media side because I use that as a learning tool. And I saw Chris's comment. I want to get to that. But
Sorry, one more
if-
question. Is in line with what you're talking about now. Twitch, is that social media? I've never used it, so I don't know.
so Twitch is interesting though because Twitch, from a gaming perspective, and I mean people do use Twitch for non-gaming, but Twitch exists because of gaming. Now I know it's a technology that's owned by AWS or Amazon, and they have their what do you call it, their counter or their opposition technology or whatever was Microsoft's what was that called? I forgot that technology. Although they dropped that now, and I think they're moving that over onto Facebook Gaming now or something. So you sit with these underdogs, which is YouTube Gaming and probably not going to be Facebook Gaming, but Twitch is the de facto from a gaming streaming perspective. So very much the same way as what a lot of people make, I think, a livelihood out of YouTube streaming, and it doesn't matter what that content is. Twitch is very specific to gaming, although I do see Twitch has now evolved, not just recently, but over the last few years. Twitch has evolved into a few other interesting categories. Now, I'm saying that's interesting because it may appeal to some and may not appeal to others, but that is the normal just chatting, which is like what we are having on YouTube. Probably not as formal where it's a guest that you have with a specific topic, but just in general. But then also other genres of what people have to broadcast, like ASMR, which is, I don't know what it stands for, but it's that technology where, not technology, it's that genre where people use audible sensory type of sounds. That is like how so somebody would like open up a plastic wrapper with a microphone and go in stereo. And so that for me is like the nonsense side of it, because if I think Twitch, I think gaming, and that's kind of where it goes. And with that, you also have monetization. People can have like the equivalent of super chats and things. So that's where Twitch fits in. But I now again, it's hard because I wouldn't think Twitch is a social media platform. Because it's a broadcast platform. So then we have to talk about what does social media then mean for us. So
Yeah, it's true.
because Facebook is also being a lot more than it was initially intended for. I don't think the Facebook we know today is the Facebook that got built by Zuckerberg in
No,
2000
it's not.
and whatever,
No, absolutely not.
2006,
No.
2005. So companies latched onto it. And even if I just think about organizational policies, 10 years ago, companies would block Facebook because it was seen as non-work related. Nowadays, Facebook is 9 out of 10 times open because there is work-related content on it. So
That's a
it
fair
becomes tricky.
point. Yeah, it's a fair point. Let's ask the audience, guys. I think we can all agree that Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, all those other social media platforms are social media. What about YouTube and Twitch? What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Do you think Twitch and YouTube are categorized as social media? Just say yes or no. Twitch and YouTube, are they categorized as social media? Yes or no? And while you guys answer that, I'm just going to give Jannie some comments here. So Luke did respond to you and said, you give them a stick and tell them to play in the garden. You can have whatever you want, tech-wise, but it shouldn't be the baseline of society. And that's a fair point as well. I think
Yeah,
it's what
no,
we've been touching on as well. All right, so let me see. I saw some cool. We've got some more people joining us. Alwyn, thank you so much. Mel S, thank you for tuning in. Hi, Bradley, giving some more comments here. I find that a big issue around tech and social media is the lack of basic knowledge and care regarding security and privacy. And with the rate that tech is advancing, it becomes more scary. Kids don't respect. Now, hold on to
that's an
that
interesting
thought.
topic.
Yes, we're going to talk about that now. But I first want to say hi to Lauren House. Thank you so much for tuning in. I can't pronounce his name. Dagbrekker, thank you so much.
Dagbreker.
Dagbrekker. Hendrik, Ronaldo, thank you so much for tuning in. So all of you that have tuned in, thank you. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. So let's see what people are saying here about the yes. It seems like a lot of people are saying yes. There's one no, but I think there's an I think so. So yeah, but majority are saying yes. I guess YouTube and Twitch would be considered social media.
So
Interesting.
Facebook's for Karens. See
Yeah.
Ronaldo saying Facebook's for Karens. See, Karen is also something we created ourselves because of that social media platform. Because I'm
Yeah,
sure
exactly.
these things existed 25, 20 years ago, but it wasn't known because the platform wasn't there to broadcast it and to do it. And if you made the weekly newspaper in your city or in your town or wherever you lived, then that was headline news. But that news was also over right when the next version of that newspaper came out, if it was daily or weekly or whatever, whereas Facebook, not Facebook, but social media, I think that doesn't apply anymore today because you see very easily how old stuff gets dug up on somebody and then, hey, this XYZ, whatever type of thing. So that's also become a problem because it goes to that next point is that, when you're on these social media platforms, something isn't really gone. People screenshot stuff, people repost that screenshot, whatever, and if it's posted on social media, you do unfortunately sit with a situation that people tend to believe it 9 out of 10 times. Now, I'm 9 out of 10 times very skeptic about most of that type of stuff. So even when Reese would show me something and she hates me for this, I would always be like, nah, this can't be true. And I will go and prove whatever she tries to show me wrong because it's just so unbelievable. Like, is this true?
Yeah, I think we all feel that way. I definitely do. When my wife shows me things, I'm like, nah, come on. There's Photoshop now. There's Final Cut.
And
There's After Effects.
then I'm in the dog box for that. So there's an interesting tech out there, and I forgot what the website's name is. And I mean, it's not that I don't want to mention the name. I think it's really cool technology, but it's going to be used for the wrong reason. It's a bunch of startup guys. So they came up with an algorithm that learns voice patterns. So you subscribe to this website, and right now, because it's like the startup, they actually you can actually use it quite a bit. You don't have to pay for it or whatever. But you teach it a couple of words, and they give you these random words you need to read, which is probably curated so that they figure out your way of speech. But out of that, whatever you type, that thing will recite it back to you
Mm.
in your voice. That is
Wow.
scary how that can be used.
Oh
It's
yeah.
not that great at the moment, but I mean, I also haven't looked at it in like a year or two. But that technology exists and existed a year or two ago, and that technology can get used for the wrong reasons. But this is now where you're taking a foundation technology like machine learning or artificial intelligence that is out there to do a lot of other good, because you have IBM's Dr. Watson that can be trained to look at millions and millions and millions of photos of, let's say, potential breast cancer patients, and that could spot breast cancer before it even has happened. How many lives would that not have saved
Mm.
if that technology, or can that not save with technology like that? But that same foundation that it's built on can also be used for the wrong reasons.
Mm.
So that unfortunately exists everywhere.
I think this again. All this advances of tech and stuff can go back to what Bradley said earlier. Around what he said about tech and social media is the lack of basic knowledge and care for regarding security and privacy. I think that is a major, 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 major flaw in when humans produce new technology. There's almost I don't want to say there's no regulations. Obviously, regulations, but it seems like more often than not, we're releasing technology and then we're like, oh crap, it had that effect. Okay, well let's now implement a law or a rule where people can't do that. With that tech,
Yeah.
which I think is a very very dangerous way of going about it, because we've seen how people have used tech, for evil.
Well, one of the most recent ones is Zoom. So Zoom, towards the end of last year, beginning of this year, as we were heading into COVID-19, Zoom was being making headlines because of the Zoom bombing and all that type of stuff. And I'm glad Zoom reacted to that in a very quickly, and how they addressed it is probably not the best way, because immediately the way how they addressed it made it almost not as fluent to use, unless you've been a Zoom user and you were kind of like growing with the changes. But if you were new to Zoom right at that time, there was a couple of extra steps you had to take to make it a little smoother to use. And I tested Zoom myself, because obviously we came up with that challenge around what technology do we use, and arguing why we should be using one over the other. I subscribe to a premium Zoom version to try and understand how the technology works, and how some of the features that we are missing today, in talking in my business capacity or work capacity, but how some of those features was missing, and how we would work around that. But going back to the point around security and those type of things, I think that's also just, I don't know what the right word is. If it's something that we need to be advocating and teaching people, and for parents to teach their kids, because if you buy a game today, if you buy something like, I don't know, Call of Duty or whatever, 9 out of 10 times, some of those games does have an age restriction. So you need to sign up to that game. So you need to be older than, I don't know, 16 years or 13 years old or whatever. So how do kids even sign up for that? Do their parents help them with that? Do they just sign up and they just up their birthday a couple of years to be old enough? So um, it's so easy for them to do those things without their parents knowing. So that becomes really hard, I think, on the parents. And this is where the interesting part now starts. Whereas, I'm voting for technology. I'm saying, as parents, we should do more. And as somebody that might understand that, we should do more to teach kids about those things, to teach them about proper passwords, and not writing passwords down, and not using simple passwords like password 123 or some of those things. So that, on the one side, I think is important, but then it still doesn't stop like that technology adoption, because why do some kids have phones today? It's to be reachable. That's the only reason why they have phones today. I don't think any parent buys their kid a phone because they want to have Facebook or something. I
Maybe.
certainly would hope not, but maybe. But kids get that phone so that they can be reachable to their parents, whatever it may be. We do live in different times than what we lived in 20 years ago or 25, 30 years ago when I was in school, and a phone would have been great. But so now all of a sudden a kid has a phone, they can go onto the app store and they can install apps to their heart's desire, and they start getting these type of exposure, and that becomes really hard. I don't know how we should be managing that, because it's not like you have control over what kids can install or can't install when you don't physically have the phone, and I don't know. But it's certainly interesting.
I think
Um,
the regulation maybe falls on the companies that control it. They need, I don't know. Surely there are think tanks that they can go to and be like, "Cool, we have this technology. Give us the worst case scenario of what people might do." I'm sure there's ways of testing it to kind of see the flaws in the technology and say, okay, cool. Well, before we release it out to the public, let's once they've done their testing, they're like, okay, cool. So now we know. Okay, maybe they won't get to everything, but they can definitely know enough. But I guess at the end of the day, as well, humans are humans. If we want to do something evil, we'll find a way. There's an interesting comment I wanted to touch on. Louis ZA says, without social media, even with the corporate regulation, freedom of speech would die. I think that's a bit extreme, to be honest. I don't think social media is the end all be all for freedom of speech. There's other forms of freedom of speech for sure. But yeah, what's your take on that?
well, how else would people do that? Do you think they would write to the newspaper?
Yeah, there's
Or
newspapers. Like I said, there's still movies. There's still, okay. Well, if we're putting YouTube now in the same basket as social media, so that obviously gets rid of that. But I'm sure there would be something else that would probably take its place that wouldn't be considered social media. Maybe a more streamlined YouTube that doesn't really interact with people, but it's more to put content out. There's still artists. You got your paintings, you got your stand-up comedy, you've got your this and your that. There's other forms of freedom of speech. I don't think social media would kill it off completely. I mean, let's be honest. There was a time before social media, and freedom of speech was still doing its good fight.
Yeah, I think it was just harder. I think social media enabled that or made it easier, certainly, but I think it would be a lot harder. And I'm trying to think of it. I'm trying to think of a situation pre-social media where freedom of speech would be, except for if you had like a march or a something where you were, out there broadcasting a message
Mm.
of sorts. But I mean, that for me would be the extreme, because it's not something that, and I mean, it still does happen today, but it's not the norm. I mean, Facebook and some of these other platforms is the easy way to kind of like just vent, and that's kind of like where I'm putting freedom of speech.
Yeah. No.
And that's it, because it's mostly negative though
Yeah.
at the moment.
I can understand that, but I don't think freedom of speech would die. I think that's a bit extreme. That's what I'm trying to say.
No,
I
no, no, I
don't.
don't
I
think it would
don't.
die
Like
either.
social media not being there doesn't mean freedom of speech is going to die. Like,
The accessibility is just harder. The
yeah.
accessibility is harder though.
Yeah,
So I
that I can
mean,
agree with.
if you think about it, how technology has changed with social media is, I don't know how many email jokes you still receive on
Oh
a
my
daily
word!
basis, but I probably receive nothing.
Really?
Um,
No, lucky you.
yeah, but people would send whatever jokes on a Monday, and you would get like 15 jokes, and you would forward those 15 jokes, and you would log up the mail servers and whatever. You don't have that anymore today, but you have that on social media all the time,
Mm.
and in WhatsApp and in whatever. I mean, I'm part of friends groups where we mail jokes around and all kinds of things. So I mean, that is, although not quite freedom of speech, but I mean, that is one way how social media has changed that. So, and I think that is kind of what would have happened with freedom of speech. It would be accessible but different, but not
Mm.
as wildfire as what social media makes it today.
Mm. Well, talking about social media, let's go with Ronaldo here. He made an interesting point. The problem with social media is exactly the same problem in real life. Idiots tend to use it, and then it has to be made idiot-proof, and then many amazing people suffer at the dumbing down of things. You know what? I think if there was a way to make that happen, where idiots couldn't use social media, yeah, social media would definitely be a much happier, nicer place to be in. But then
But
again,
aren't you then censoring it?
that's what I was about to say. Then again,
Yeah.
you know, you can't. I don't know. Well, that's again the fight of freedom of speech and all that. But an interesting point nonetheless. And let's see here, Joe Emilio. I just feel this is from Alwyn De Bruyne. I just feel that all of this is robbing me, ironically, of my voice. What specifically is robbing you of your voice? And then we have Luke saying, Yanni, it's not the tech that's the problem for kids, it's the different ethics of what is acceptable behavior for this new generation. Fair point.
That's true. Yep, agreed.
And then Yanni, Bradley also agreeing with you. He says, I absolutely agree with you. I'm all for tech, for people that know what they are doing. We can launch internal firewalls, etc. Most parents don't have a clue what they're doing. This is also, you see, that's also another good point. Like, I think a lot of parents nowadays maybe take tech for granted to a certain degree. Like, they just assume that maybe, because there are parents out there that are like this, where they just assume like, oh no, the tech will protect my child, in a sense, if that makes
Yep.
sense. They don't
Yep.
realize that they need to like put certain restrictions on apps or certain restriction on like Google or whatever, so that the child doesn't go to some weird website or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is.
Now, and the thing is, though, there is tech for that, though, but it's not something that is. I think there's companies that can do a lot better or can do a better job at that. Because now I don't want to promote specific brands, but there's definitely brands that you would find that did antivirus as we knew it in the old days, that has mobile apps available, that is a subscription based service that you can install on a child's phone, that doesn't necessarily track the child, because that also could be an invasion of privacy thing, and I don't know how that should be with a parent and child and what they have access to with whatever the child does. But it's more what the child is doing, or on what a child is doing it. But certainly restricting screen time, restricting access to certain categories of data on these over-the-top type of services. There's apps out there for that, but it's not widely known. People don't know about that, and it is something that I think could easily help out with what a child is exposed to,
Mm,
especially with like cyber bullies
mm,
and you touched on it earlier, which is the legal child trade, where you like
yeah.
enticing children with certain type of content and whatever, like all of the type of stuff, like it would stop that, but it's not known.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's not that human trafficking and ISIS also recruits through social media. You know, these, and I think this is the thing. Like, yes, all for freedom of speech. Anybody who knows me and has been following me on this YouTube channel knows that I'm all for freedom of speech. I'm battling cancel culture now, which is, you know, my right, freedom of expression and freedom of speech. My thing with social media, so let me make this clear, is I I see more negative than I see positive with social media, and that's my experience with it. I'm sure everyone else has their own experiences. Look, and maybe because I'm a public figure, that's why I see more negativity with it, so I can understand that. I'm just saying, like we just discussed now, maybe if there was a little bit more regulations on these social media platforms, not to the extent where it stops your freedom of speech, but I think it's important to know that even with freedom of speech, that it has its limitations as well. You can't just say anything. You know, if you're inciting violence, if you're inciting hate speech, all that stuff, that can't be done. And in some cases on social media, people are getting away with that,
Yeah.
especially with cyberbullying as well. And those are the things, you know, like ISIS recruiting and the human trafficking. Like, I feel that, you know, everyone's so worried about the freedom of speech aspect of it, but all these other negative things are happening, and not much is being done about it. At least that's the impression I'm getting. And that's my gripe with it.
Agreed. I mean, from the other side of that fence, because I'm not a public figure in that respect. So social media for me is mostly consumption
Hmm.
rather than content creation and putting a message out there.
Yeah.
Um, Social media for me means a lot more. And now I'm broadly categorizing it. Whether it's YouTube, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Twitter, but social media for me is more worthwhile with the fact that you have content creators like yourself, like
Hmm.
Ronaldo, like Chris White, whatever, that has that message to say. But that also, I'm categorizing you guys as good content creators, somebody that I do want to listen to, and somebody that doesn't talk a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah.
So on the other side, you also have a bunch of, junk on there because it's that easy for people to put something out there, whether it's forwarding nonsense images or whatever. I mean, I can't even, and I mean, I don't even know what is now legal anymore or not. But there was that shooting over the weekend, I think in a church or something.
Yes.
I can't even, how many times I've seen those pictures being forwarded around. Like, is that even right or not? Like, is that platform being used in the right way to circulate that type of stuff? Because imagine if it was a weird car accident and it's a family member and it's somebody that is close to you that you care about, and you see that picture forwarded gazillion times out of something. So do have a little bit of a problem with that. Um,
Yes.
but at
Privacy.
the same time, social media for me is also annoying me from time to time because when I look at it, it's all the same thing. I don't always get to the content that I want to consume on that platform. I have to what's the right word? I have to, brush through a ton of other stuff that is not of interest of me, but it is relevant
Hmm.
of the time we're living, the location I'm at, the things that I follow, whatever that may be. So, if I can take one thing away from social media, it'd probably be that. I would want like a spam filter for all of that type of nonsense because that's not what I want to see. I really want to only see the stuff I want to keep an eye out for.
Hmm. Well, I did know that some of the algorithms are working on that to make sure that whatever content you want to see, they're going to provide it for you. Okay, so I just want to. We've gone over an hour. This is it like flew by. Um,
It did.
I'm sorry, guys. I love the fact that you guys are sending in questions and making comments. It's beautiful. I love it. All of you seem really interested in this topic, which is great. So Yanni, because of the interest, would you be willing to come back and continue this conversation?
More than happy to.
All right,
I think
great.
this was fun, and I enjoy. Sorry, Joe. And I enjoy the fact that we can actually have a conversation where somebody can openly say that they differ. Because, like I say, I'm that one guy that's voting for technology no matter what. But I know we need to look at, some of the components that we know as issues, like Bradley saying. Bradley Cook was saying, is parental control apps. It's an absolute must. I agree with that, but then I go back to Chris's comment where he's saying that technology is not the problem, but the manufacturers must anticipate the malicious use of the products and protect the consumers. So this is where I'm thinking is I agree with what Brad's saying, I agree with what Chris is saying. Like, how do we get some of these technology vendors to be more proactive, more in
Mm.
your face, more like you can't buy a phone unless it has certain parental control apps or whatever on it? Like, how do you make it safer for kids to use? Because the reality is, kids today are going to get exposed to technology. They have to get exposed to technology because 20 years from now, a kid that's born now or a kid that's, a couple of years old now, 20 years from now when they enter the workforce, it's going to look a whole lot different than what it looks today.
Exactly. And again, like I want to say this again. Like I love tech. I actually really do love tech. I just, I'm the kind of I can't root for it no matter what. I feel like there needs to be every time there's an invention, every time there's like, okay, cool, we've made this thing now. We need to take a step back and be like, okay, before we let it out, what are the implications that we're doing to the human race? Because I do think that to some extent, we're not better off because of tech, to some extent. And if you were to ask me, yeah, okay, well, pre-tech, like, let's go back in time to like before the internet was invented, right? And you asked me, do you think that time was better? I think it was a simpler time. I
Yeah.
think, but I won't disagree that the evil that we have in the world was still there. So, and that's where it's like, the evil in the world that exists is always going to be there. And we're like anything that's invented, the atomic bomb, all these other things, the cars, every invention that humankind has made. Evil will find a way to use it in a bad way, and this is
Yeah.
across the board. Um, so I'm well aware of that. I just would like you just said, to see, and what Bradley just said, to see, or Chris, to see manufacturers and people that are inventing this stuff to take, or at least start very seriously taking consideration as to what that tech is doing to the future generation of this world.
And I think tech companies won't do that yet. I think something, and I don't like saying this, but I think something really bad has to happen before that might happen or something. Because, and why am I saying this is, we live in a day and age where almost everything has either been discovered, invented, thought about, created, or whatever. So it becomes really, really hard now to develop that one niche thing that is the next best thing that somebody wants to have, like the next TikTok or the next whatever. So companies are going to launch whatever that product is as soon as possible to get it to market, to get that head start. And we are used to growing with the product because if you look at, I don't know how old Netflix is, but it's probably going to be a bad example. Let's think about something else. Um,
iPhones.
well, let's look at, no, not even iPhones. I want to talk about something that was really crap when it launched, but we loved it because we wanted it. And it kind of like went, as time went by, it became better and we grew with that technology. So I'm either an app
Cell
or a
phones.
something, but there's some app somewhere, there's some technology somewhere that was crap when it launched. We all went for it. And maybe iPhone is a good idea. We all ran
Well,
for
cell
iPhones. I
phones
don't
in
know
general.
why. Cell phones and smartphones and whatever. We all ran
Yeah.
for it because we wanted this touchscreen, whatever phone, to take photos with it and we can install apps, but you didn't know what to install
Mm.
on the phone, and you had nobody to share it with because not everybody had that phone. But as time went past, we grew with that, and that kind of like became better. And I think the human race is used to that. We used to getting small pieces of changes and upgrades and updates that make something progressively better as time goes past. So,
Mm.
um, yeah. And I wanted to get back to your point around the 80s or before social media time or whatever. Think about the prohibition era in the 1920s or whatever. Alcohol, not tobacco, but the alcohol ban in the US and whatever. Like
Mm-hmm.
in a time where there was definitely no technology, that business thrived. I can promise you today, I can't comment on it because I'm not involved in that trade, but I know for a fact that the social media platforms are advocating, whatever illegal products are being sold, and it's being a success is being made in that,
Mm-hmm.
even today. So I mean, I agree with you. I think social media makes it easier, but a lot of that bad still happened 100 years ago.
Exactly. Well,
It was
that's
still there.
yeah.
I mean, it
That's,
is. We just didn't know about it necessarily, or if you weren't in those circles, you wouldn't have known about it.
yeah, which is what I was trying to say. All right, so I'm gonna end it here because I
Okay.
really want people to watch the show, and I really try and keep my shows as close to an hour as possible because I think this was a great chat, Yanni. People have asked us to continue the conversation, so I will, like I said, don't go anywhere. I'll give you a proper goodbye when we're done here, but
Cool.
we will chat about a future date for part two. And by the way, guys, those of you that commented and asked questions, any questions I didn't go to, I promise you what I'm going to do is uh, once we're done here, I'm going to go back. I'm going to watch this again. I'm going to look at the chats and I'm going to jot down all the questions that you guys had that we didn't get to. And we'll bring them up in the next session. I think that's a good because there's so many comments and so many questions. So I think that would be a good way to start the next conversation. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Please, if you're new to my channel, please subscribe. Please like and let people know about this video. And Yanni, thank you, man. It was so great to see you in person and not behind a blue spanner.
Thanks so much. And likewise, Joe, and thanks for having me on your show. And I would really love to come back and continue the conversation. It's really hard following chat when you're in conversation like this. So I really take my hat off for all of you guys with your channels, because there's a couple of interesting points, even the point around smartwatches and whatever. I would really love for us to continue this conversation. So thank you.
We will. Yeah. I'll like I said, I'll go back into the comments and I will see what we didn't touch on, and we'll talk about it in the next one. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys so much. Tomorrow I am chatting to, before you guys go anywhere, I am chatting to a communist and a Marxist, and he's admitted this to me face to face, and I'm going to be chatting to him on my channel. We're going to be chatting about Marxism, communism, and the Dallas Cowboys. Umbulelu, who is the sports guy at Gareth Cliff on cliffcentral.com. Please tune into that. That's tomorrow night at 9 p.m., ladies and gentlemen, 9 p.m. But yeah, if I don't see you tomorrow night, I'll see you at the next one. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. You guys are awesome. Subscribe, like, and I'll see you at the next one. Cheers. Hey guys, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and a share. That's how my content gets out there. Also, don't be afraid to comment. I usually do respond to the comments in the comment section below. If you want to support my channel, please go to the link in the description below, support my channel, and you'll be taken to my website, which has all the details. Also, if you're new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, feel free to check out the links below to my social media accounts. Give me a follow, and I'll see you at the next one.